Okay, hi everybody who's watching post this meeting. So the general info tab is all, I think, pretty self-explanatory. If there are questions, shoot me an email and you can ask there. That'll be fine. So for keyboard shortcuts, if you want to highlight, say if you want to highlight this, you can click and drag, right? You can just hold left click and then drag down to whatever you want. But if you don't want to use your mouse because that takes too long, you can do Control Shift and then arrow keys. And that'll highlight the entire, say you have a table or column, whatever it is. If you want to highlight anything to the right or to the left, you just click that arrow. Or if you want to click to the right, and that's fine too. Now, if you want to navigate to the beginning of this sheet, say I'm all the way down here and I want to go back to the top left, you do Control Home. It'll kick you to A1. And if you do Control End, it'll take you to the end, which is N21 in this case. And for inserting a column or row, this is also really useful, especially if you have a table. Say right here, we have this table right here, and we want to insert a column right here between genre and runtime. We can just select this, and click Control+, and then you can decide where you want to shift the cells that are currently there. Typically, you'll want to, if you have a column, you'll want to shift to the right or the left. And if you have a row, you want to shift it up or down. So in this case, I want to shift it to the right, and then I can add another column, whatever it may be. And then delete column is Control-. So say right here, you can see I have a blank column, and I don't want that there because I want the table to be one continuous table. I can do Control-, shift cells to the left, and then it'll make it one continuous table. Now, comment. This is only really useful if you're going to say, for example, you're going to send this off to your boss or your manager or something, and you want to comment on something that may be ambiguous or hard to understand. You press Shift F2, and then you can type a comment, just a random comment. And then later on, there'll be a little red arrow here indicating that you left a comment. And then as far as these miscellaneous keyboard shortcuts go, these are just standard for every computer. If anybody is on Mac right now, know that anytime I say Control, you should be pressing Command. That's as far as the differences between Mac and Windows go, as far as I know. If I'm wrong, please correct me. Now for formatting, a lot of these you won't really use too often. Merge and center is really useful for, say you have a long title like this, and you want to merge G and H just to make it look nicer. You can click Merge and Center up here in the Alignment tab of Home, and then it'll be one cell. So if I go to the left with the left arrow key, it'll go F. If I go to the right, it'll be G and H as one cell. And it doesn't apply for any row beyond that. So you can see that only G is highlighted, but when I go back to that cell, it'll be G and H. So GH1 is if you wanted to reference that. For wrap text, this is also another way to sort of make sure your data is all showing, or make sure a cell is showing everything within that cell. For example, here we have the shining, and you can see that it's cut off a little bit by the next column H. We can click wrap text, and it'll just basically put it in another line. That's also, I'd say that's not really as used compared to merge and center. It's still really useful sometimes, but generally, I'd say you don't want to alter the row height as much as you want to alter the column width, if that makes sense. And that brings us to expanding columns. You can click and drag. Say I want to expand G. You want to right between G and H, so always to the right of whatever column you want to alter. You're going to want to click and drag it to whatever width you want, and then that'll just drag the entire column. Another way that you can do it, this is really useful, and this has saved my life a lot of times. At the top left, left of A and above 1, you can click this little triangle right there. And if you double click any line between two columns, it'll reformat and resize every single column in the entire sheet. Likewise for rows. If you say you have that, oh no, don't do that. Say we have row 8 is super big, but we obviously don't need it to be, then we can just double click anywhere on the rows and it'll reformat all the rows and resize it to make it all uniform. And that's really useful if you have, say, or like right here, you have the Fellowship of the Ring that's really long and you don't want to just click and drag it out here because then there's extra space. You can just double click this column, or between the lines, or I should say between the columns on that line, it'll resize it for you. Now, moving cells, this is only really useful if, for example, right here, you have this 7 right here, which is clearly a price. You want this to be in the price column, but it's not. You can just Control X, which is cut, and then paste it back there. Now for accounting format, this is also really useful. There are 2 money formats, main money formats. So if we select this whole thing, right here in the number tab of home, there is a little $sign. You can click that and it'll add $signs in front of the whole, in front of the cell, and then it'll add cents or up to 2 decimal places. Now, if you click this drop down in the number for formatting, you can format it as currency. I'd recommend you never do this because it puts a $sign immediately in front of whatever amount you have, which is really annoying when, say, you have $550 here, but you have like $9,000 or 900 in this case. The $sign is way over here and the $sign is way over here. It just simply doesn't look as good as if you had all the $signs aligned on the left. So that's just, it's sort of a personal preference, but I found that most people prefer accounting to currency just because currency kind of looks clunky with all your $signs not aligned. Inserting and deleting columns, that was just over here, Control plus or Control minus. One thing I will say, if you try to use Control plus next to the backspace, you have to make sure to use Control Shift plus, because if you just do Control plus, it'll just be Control equals, which actually doesn't do anything. But yeah, that's about it for this sheet. Does anybody have any questions up till this point? I know I went really fast. Yeah, well, the Excel workbook was sent out to the listserv. We'll also put it on the Facebook page afterwards, along with the solutions for this. Okay. If you want to delete the comment, it's sort of like a text box. You'll go to whatever cell has it, and then you can click Shift F2 again, and then click on the borders of that, and then just click delete on your keyboard, and it should delete it immediately. There might be a better way to do it, but I'm not exactly sure. That's just the quickest in my opinion. But yeah, I don't think comments are, I should know, comments aren't really used too often. It's mostly if you're sending over the Excel sheet to someone else and there is something that's ambiguous. Yeah, like Chloe said, the Excel sheet was sent out in the listserv email this morning. But yeah, if there are any other questions, you can just stick it in the chat and I can answer it or someone else can answer it as well. Moving on to tables. So this is probably going to be one of the most important things that you learn in Excel. It's just really easy for data manipulation. So I'm just going to be using this table over here as an example. So we have Joe's video store, and say I want to make this whole thing a dedicated table, be able to name it and be able to sort and filter accordingly. The easiest way to do that, select the top left. We can do the Control Shift down. Control Shift down again because there's a little space there, and then Control Shift to the right, and then we can do Control T. Control T is the shortcut to add a table, and then here it can, it'll double check, say where is the data, make sure that it is. If it's not, you can drag it out one more, or you can just simply type in another row. So we want to add column O. Now, if we refresh that, it should just include column O as well. Click My Table has headers because obviously these aren't data points. These are just column headers. And we click OK. And now we can see it's a nicely formatted table. It makes sure that it has these little drop-down arrows here. These drop-down arrows are super useful. They allow you to sort and filter. So say you wanted to see all of these except, I don't know, we don't want to see the shining for whatever reason. We can click OK, and it'll just get rid of that row. To get it back, we just click that drop down again, and we can either click select all or scroll down and click the shining again, then click OK. So this is mostly really useful for formatting purposes. If I wanted to format this column price into accounting, it's really clunky to Control Shift down the whole thing. So with the table, if you go to home and then select whatever cell and then format that specific cell, it'll reformat all cells in that same column. So if I just click accounting for this one cell, oh, I guess not. Okay, never mind. You have to do the Control Shift down. My mistake. What will change, however, is say I wanted to add another column here, right? Say I want this column to be, let's just say price or runtime divided by price, for example, just to throw it out there. We can do equals and then runtime, which is 121 divided by the stars. And you can see that it doesn't actually reference the cell. It's not K3 divided by L3. It's actually runtime minutes over stars. And essentially what that'll do is that'll copy it. If I just click enter, it'll copy it for the entire table. And then C, you can see divide by 0. Since there's nothing in this in these two cells, you can't divide by 0. And since that's 0, it won't divide anything. So now back to here, we've kind of gone over some of these. If you want to rename your table, you can select any cell within your table, go to table design on the ribbon. This is to the right of all of the other tabs. And then you can change the table name right here. So say we want to just name it Joe's Video Store. We can name it Joe's Video Store. Do note that when you're naming a table, it can't have any special characters. So that includes apostrophe, slashes, periods, commas, things like that. And it can't include spaces. So just keep that in mind when you're naming tables. For a conditional formatting, this is also something that's really useful. Say you want to format this column price based off of if the value is greater than a certain number. What we can do is on the Home tab, you can click Conditional Formatting. You can either manage rules or new rule, and then you can just choose different things, and you can use a formula. So this is the most robust way to do it. If you want to say, if you want to say equals, and then N3 is greater than 5, for example, and then change the format by clicking Format. And you can kind of play around with whatever format we want. So we want to just highlight it yellow. Then we can just click OK, and then it'll highlight all the ones where the price is greater than 5. And that's just something that's sort of, extra. It doesn't really alter the values at all. It's just one way to really easily visualize everything. You could obviously also sort this smallest to largest, and then go to wherever 5 is and see everything below that would obviously be greater than 5. As far as these operators go, this is, A plus B. This is sort of just things that you can do. Make sure that when you're doing A times B, if you want to do that, you hit equals. Say you want to do 4 times 8. It'll obviously do 32. If you do 4 and the parentheses 8, it won't recognize it. And it'll say, we found a typo. Would you like to correct it to 4 times 8? So this is very similar to coding. If you just put parentheses, it doesn't mean anything. You have to make sure to put the asterisk there, otherwise it won't recognize it as multiplication. One other thing to note is that anytime you want to do a formula or anytime you want to do any operation, you have to start with an equal sign. That just tells Excel, hey, we're going to start calculating something, pay attention to everything that's coming up next. And it also, you'll know if you're doing it right, because when you click equals and you start typing something, say we want to use the sum function. If I type S, it'll give a bunch of functions that start with S. And then if I click SU, it'll give a bunch of functions that start with SU. So you can see there's some ifs, some product, and different things like that. And then if, say we want to do sum and it's highlighted, we can click tab, and then it'll automatically come up. And then we can type whatever, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it'll sum all of those, 10. As far as other functions, we have all of these here. So min, max, median, average, variance, count, count A, and sum. These are all, really useful, especially for something like price. If you want to find the minimum price of a movie, say you only have $5 on you, or say you want to buy a movie, but also, buy something else with that, you can use the minimum function. So right here, say, or for example, here, if we want the shortest movie, we can click equals min, tab. And then for the shortest movie, we can just do this column runtime, Control Shift down to highlight the whole thing, enter, and it'll say 81 minutes. And then we can see 81 minutes is Toy Story. Alternatively, if you have a table, again, this is why it's also really useful. Sort smallest to largest, and you can already see the minimum. Maximum, you just go to the bottom. or you can sort largest to smallest, and then you can get 178, which is the fellowship of the ring. A lot of these are pretty self-explanatory. Var S is sample variance. Just know that it's not population variance. It is sample variance. Count A counts the number of cells that contain something. So count would be numbers, right? So if you have, if you wanted to count this, it would only count the numbers. It wouldn't count these, I believe. And for count A, it would count, you know, say if you wanted to count these that contained FA, the specific string FA, then it would return all the ones that have fantasy. And yeah, I think that's about it for this. If you want to create a filter and you don't have a table, say we have, I don't know, let's just do name, genre, or we can just copy this also. And we wanted to create filters here, but we didn't want to make a table for whatever reason. You can do Control-Shift-L, and it'll create filters for these right here. And you can just filter these really easily. Something that's also really useful is see all formulas, which is Control and then the little tiny apostrophe. I'm not actually sure what that is, but the tilde key right under escape, it'll show all your formulas that you've used. Like here, you can see the runtime divided by whatever it was. Here you can see the minimum function that we used before. These are all sort of just, this was just for indenting purposes. You can see all of the functions that we used. Press Control tilde again, and it'll go back to normal. This is something that I actually did not know. This is really useful, actually. If you're working on a cell and say you want to enter something into this cell really quickly, you don't want to move your hand all the way to your mouse and double click this to enter it in, right? What you can do, you can click F2 and you can immediately start clicking something. Click F2 again and start typing whatever you want. So that's actually really useful. I'm probably going to use that a lot. I didn't know that until yesterday. So that's also one thing. Excel is always a learning process. If you don't know every function and you don't remember every formula or every formatting thing, it's okay. You can Google a large majority of this. Half the part is just problem solving. I think it's sort of similar to coding in that aspect. But yeah, are there any questions so far? If not, I can kick it over to Ivo. Do you want to share your screen, Ivo?
Yeah, I'm gonna share my screen.
Perfect.
Which one? Let's just do the entire screen. All right, there we go. So formulas tabs. So in this tab, I'm gonna show you guys a bit more details in terms of things that you're gonna use when you write formulas. So like Ethan said, when you want to start writing a formula, you just start by putting in a equal sign, and that indicates to Excel what you're going to type in is a formula. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is about cell referencing, and specifically about how to put locks on your cell references. So cell references, let me zoom in real quick. Cell references indicates to, means these almost like location addresses like F4, say, or A1. So A1 is basically this cell and B2 is this cell. So those are so these are the cell references. And when we are writing a formula, we can put locks on these references. So what does that mean? Say, take example as this small data grid over here. This is not, this is different from the typical data tables we have. We have all these nice columns. Well, there we have a column, and here we just have one value, right? So say I want to say here, okay, I want to add these values to this one and output over here. So in this one I type, of course, so this is A16 plus a B16, hit enter, that's a 2, right? And same as in a lot of data tables, I want to apply this to the rest of this column over here. So I just click here and I drag all the way down here, but then we see a problem. We see that, okay, so 2 is 1 plus 1, all right. But this is not 2 plus 1, this should be 3, and these 3 are wrong. So why is that? So if we look back into the formula again, we see that when we shift down the formula down to automatically fill the table, it shifts A16 down to A17. That's okay, but B16 is also shifted down, which is not something we want. So how do we prevent that from happening? Let me delete these for now. So we want to indicate to Excel, okay, so when we drag down, we want to shift a column downwards respectively, but we want this B16 to stay the same. What we do is, in the formula, we can select B16, and what I do is press F4. See how the dollar signs appeared in front of the B and 16. These dollar signs indicate, okay, this cell reference, this address is now locked. And you can actually, if you hit F4 multiple times, you can see a shift in different states. Sometimes there's a dollar sign in front of the number. Sometimes there's the dollar sign in front of the character that reference to the columns. You can lock the column reference and row reference separately or altogether, or not at all. So in this case, I'm going to lock B16 as the particular cell. If you lock both, it's basically a particular cell. So we're going to lock that, and we are going to reapply the formulas. See, now it works all right. It's 2 + 1 is 3, this 4 is 5. So now it works all right. So what I mean by you can lock them separately. So in this case, if I lock, say for this A16 here, okay, if I say, okay, let's lock this to column A, but 16 doesn't have a dollar sign, so 16 can still shift up and down, like numbers refers to the rows, right? So it can still shift up and down. So if I format this formula in such a way, I drag again, it'll still do what I asked it to do. And actually, if I apply the same formula to the right, you can see it stays the same because the A doesn't move. The A column and B column are both locked in place. So if I don't have that, in fact, when I shift to the right, everything will shift to the right with me, and that will be more error to deal with. So that is basically how you lock in columns and rows. You put a dollar sign in front of the address reference that you want to lock. You can F4 is the shortcut to shift the state of a reference, like in between these different things. If you repeatedly press it will just shift between these. You can also just type in the dollar sign by yourself if you're actually typing the cell references manually, so you can do that. It's just a typical dollar sign, it's not anything magic. So there's that. Moving on from self-references, we have some more formulas that comes in useful when you're getting information out of the data table. So to start with, we have the these operators, these logic statements and logic operators. These are like, I'm sure all of you are familiar with these things: equal to, less than, greater than, less than, equal to. So equal to and less than, greater than are just very familiar. And something worth noting is that if you are used to some kind of say programming language and you think to check whether two things are equal, some say I know in Python is the case, a lot of the programming languages, you put double equal signs, not what we do in Excel. Excel just use one single equal sign, and it knows it means to check whether things are equal. Say if I want to do here, this first equal sign is a formula, and then 3 = 3. It checks that, that's true. So just one single equal sign. And say for less than, if I put 3 less than 4, checks that's true. And so greater than is the same thing. For less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, it basically just place another equal sign after the less than or greater than sign. So that's less than and equal to, greater than or equal to, same thing. So for not equal to, it's the same logic as these two. This basically says it's less than or greater than. If you think about it, that excludes all the other values that are equal to the value you're checking. So if I say I want to check 3 is less than or greater than 4, that basically means I'm checking 3 is not equal to 4, and that would tell me it's true. So these are the logic operators we have. So with these logic operators, we can now do something like an if statement. So if statement, the parameters or the syntax looks something like this. What it basically means is if you put an if and then parentheses, you put in 3 parameters, a condition, which is something that you check and you return a true or false, a return a Boolean value. That's your condition. So if this condition checks to true, it goes to this value if true. Basically, it's either a value that it will return or some action that it will take as a result. But this is only if the condition evaluates to true. And then afterwards, the third one is if the condition evaluates to false, then it will do this one instead. So there is a 3-part syntax. It has 3 parameters that it takes in. So let's do an example, say something like, say if we check 3 is less than 4. And if this value is to true, I want it to return yes. So notice by default, it will return these Boolean values, something like this simple logic operation. It will return the Boolean values, which is all capitalized words, true or false. These words, these are the, these all capitalized true or false stands for the Boolean value in Excel by default. But instead, I want to return, well, I want this to return the string yes or the string no. Oh, that's one here. So if I run this, see, it will try to evaluate this, say 3 less than 4, that's a true. So it goes to yes, and it will evaluate to this string. It will print out this string that I asked it to do. And if I actually ask this to check whether 3 is equal to 4, it's obviously false. So it will tell me a no, the no that I specified it to do. If I change this, I can change this no to whatever thing I just wanted to randomly, I don't know, return a 5, it will give me a 5, right? So these are the things I can ask a if statement to do. You can actually nest. Remember when I said this value, if true, can either be a value or be some further actions. You can actually nest a lot of if statements inside each other. See, for this one, you can check if condition, value if true, but then if value is false, notice that the third parameter in this if statement is just another if statement. So you're basically telling it if this first condition evaluates to false, then run another if function check. So you can nest however many of these if statements inside each other. You can nest them in just indefinitely. It's not always the best way to do things, but this is at least available if you want to do a more complex logic check. And the one foremost reason that you might not want to do this too much, and you might not want to nest too much of these inside each other, is that checking the parentheses will be kind of painful. Like even though Excel has this function, say, if I want to do another if in here, you can see how the parentheses have different colors. It will try to help you identify which parenthesis is which, but still, this is just very easy to get lost. You can easily get lost or get messed up, and going back to see where you missed the parentheses is not, trust me, it's not going to be a good experience. So you want to utilize that reasonably. And moving on, we have AND statement. So AND statement basically takes in a lot of conditions, say 2 conditions or more conditions, and it checks that whether all of them are true. Because if what you're basically telling is you want this and this. So if all of them are true, this AND statement will eventually return you a true. If any one of these conditions inside the AND statement is a false, then even just one of them, it will return you a false. So let's see. So for an example, I put and oh, by the way, I think the function names in Excel is not case specific. So say if I want to check 3 is less than 4, and you separate each parameter with a comma, and then I also want to check 1 is less than 10, just out of random reasons. So both of these are true. So when I check it with the AND statement, it will give me a true. But if one of them, say, also now I want to check 1 is greater than 10, that's false. So one of these two logical statements is a false, and it will give me a false. Even if, say, I add another, say, 1 less than 2, but there's still this false in the middle here, so eventually this will still give me a false. And similarly, we have OR condition. It takes in also like how many ever more than one logic statements it will check. But for OR statement, if any one of those is a true, it will ultimately return you a true. But if all of them are false, only then it will return a false. Say similar thing, I want to check 4 less than 5 and 1 less than say 2 less than 1, 2 less than 1. So one of these, 2 less than 1 is a false, right? But 4 less than 5 is a true. So if I evaluate this with an OR statement, it will give me a true. And also, let me check this real quick, actually. I think, yeah, so this OR statement is not what we sometimes call a explicit OR. So explicit OR basically takes out the AND. Sorry, let me phrase it better so it's not confusing. Explicit OR is something that's, say in this condition, both 4 less than 5 and 2 greater than 1 are true. So this is not actually an OR. So both of them are true. It's almost a AND situation. And the explicit OR operators will give you back a false in this situation, in fact. But in Excel, this is not something that complicated. You just remember that any one of these, as long as you have something that is true inside the OR statement, it will give you a true. Otherwise, if all of them are false, it will give you a false. And not operator, not basically reverses a logic. So say if I want to say not true, it will give me false. And if I say not 1 less than 2, where 1 less than 2 is a true, right? So not 1 less than 2 is a false. This just inverts the Boolean value to the opposite side. So moving on from all those logical things, the logic operators and the if statement and or not statements, we have string manipulation. So I'm not going to go over all the details in terms of how you manipulate strings explicitly with formulas, because Excel is quite a user-friendly software. You can just type things, change things. But say you want to check how many characters in a string. This is where you can use a formula. Say, if I want to check, okay, how many characters are in Toy Story? So I'm gonna use this function len. It stands for length. And you select this cell and then hit enter. It checks for you. So if you take a count at it, so TOY, that's 3, STORY, that's 5. So that's 8. Where's the other one? The other one is this space character in between the two words. So whenever you have a string, the spaces in the middle that is being printed out, it actually takes a space. So say if I change this cell and I want to say Toy Story 3, I add a space, I add a 3. So I added 2 more characters. You can see here it now counts an 11 back. So that's length. That's for you to count how many characters in a string. And concat and this AND operator. So these two actually does the same thing. It both combines both strings. So there's as far as using them, there's not too much difference between these two. You can almost see these two as identical. The only underlying difference of these two methods is that with this operator, you can combine as many strings as you want, but for the concat function or the concatenate function from older versions, they actually have a limit of how many strings you can put in. I think right now it's 255. there are also sayings that in the older versions, the concatenate function has a limit of only 30, but those are, I guess those are back in the days. But as far as using them, you can see these two as basically the same. So say for this example, by the way, this table up here is just a quick example that you can use to try this method on your own. If you want to mess around with it, just feel free to go ahead. And I'm also going to use them as examples. So say for movie and genre, I want to say, let's add a column over here. I want this column to display the movie name and then a parentheses, and inside the parentheses has the genre. So I don't want to type in everything manually. I want to do this in an efficient manner. So how do I do that? So start with an equation. Let's do the operator first. So I'm gonna select this cell, so that's a string. And then I'm gonna connect this string with a space and then a parentheses. So see, I put these, so see, I put these inside these parentheses. It's not called parentheses. What are these called? Quotation marks. So I put these inside the quotation marks. That means this is a string. So immediately after the movie name, I want a space. I want a parentheses. This is a string, and then we do the genre, and afterwards we close with another back parentheses. Enter. So okay, so expand this. You can see now it's the movie name with the genre inside the parentheses, and you can apply this. You can apply this formula to the entire column, and it will do everything for you nicely. So you don't have to type anything in. You don't have to type these strings in. So this is concatenation. So this is with the operator. It will be the same thing if I use the concat function. So so see how here it actually speaks concatenate. Strange. I see the concat function earlier when I was trying this, but those are also the similar thing. So if you concatenate, I can say this string, and then so here I separate them with comma because these are just parameters of this function. I do a space and parentheses. I do the genre, and then a closing parentheses. A parentheses to close this entire function. Hit enter. It does the same thing. You can see the output is not any different. Apply this. There's no visible change when you reapply the function. So those two methods are basically the same for you to use. So that's about strings. And moving on to dates. Dates is a kind of a more or less special data type inside Excel. So many times when you have a large data table, a practical data table, it records some kind of date. You can see something like, say if I want to put today's date, I can use this function. I'm moving on this function as today and parentheses. It doesn't take in any parameters, so it's just a empty parentheses. But this is a function that will give you back today's date. So this now says November 23rd. This is today's date. And you can see up here, the format is date. But if you actually change this format back to number, you see this strange thing. What does that mean? So it works in a way that in Excel and oftentimes in many other programming languages, date values are actually, their nature is some kind of numerical value. Sometimes it's integers, sometimes it can have floats, but the nature of it is a numerical value. If I have 1, just straightforward a value of 1, and I want it to be displayed as a date, you can see how 1 actually stands for January 1st of 1900. And respectively, if I change this value to 2, it becomes January the 2nd. If I change this to 32, is February the 1st of that year. So this is how many days from actually not like January 1st and 1900. And what's interesting too, and you should notice that if you put a 0 here, in some programming languages, like putting 0 values or negative values allows you to go backwards from 1900. But in this case, you can see it's kind of messed up. It gives you this January 0, which means nothing. And worse if you, oh, let me change the format back real quick. Even worse if you put this as a -1 and then you put it to date, it basically poops itself. So don't do that in Excel. It doesn't go further back from 1900. And I wouldn't imagine, like, in common cases, you need to do that anyways. So that's the nature of the date values in here. When you use the function today, it automatically formats it as a date, just so it's nice. And you can have, say, let's bring the today back. More functions you can use to evaluate date values. If you have the year function, if you put the date into a year function, it basically extract the date, the year. So this is the entire date, and I use year function on it. It takes out the year 2020. And similarly, we have month. So if you do month of this particular date, it takes out the month 11 or November. And you can also do that for day. It's the same thing. Put a day here, gives you 23. Oh, I see something popping up in chat. Hold on, I'm not actually seeing the chat. Oh, there we go. So what is the rule of converting a random number into a date? So Lex said is, so remember I showed that 1 evaluates to January 1st, right? So when you add 1 to this, if you add 1 to 1, that's a 2, and that's January the 2nd. It basically goes up. 1 integer value is one day, basically. So that's how many days from January. January 0 almost. So see, this is kind of weird comparing to sometimes in the programming languages, often 0 is January 1st, and then whatever value going up from it is how many days after January 1st. So see here, I actually should say a integer value, like just some random integer value, is how many days from January 0 of 1900. It kind of doesn't make sense in the intuitive real life way, but that's kind of how it works. So integer values basically add however many days to the base value, the 0 base value. Is that making sense? Okay, just pop more questions if this is still somehow confusing. I'll put more time into it. But yeah, this basically concludes this slide. So I'm going to pause real quick. Any question about anything I went through in this slide, keep them coming for now. And if not, I'm going to move on to next tab. All right, let's move on for now then. You can always refer back to the previous tab, so we don't mind that at all. So coming up next is about making charts. So here we are going to cover 3 basic types of chart: bar chart, pie chart, and histograms. So making charts is a nice skill to have because with charts, you can easily visualize the data that you have, especially when you're trying to make some kind of presentation, or to be the least, show your analysis to someone. It's good to have visualized results. So starting from bar chart, what you do basically to create a chart is to go to Insert tab on the ribbon. And then you can see here in the charts section, it has all these buttons you can press. Nowadays, Excel is smart enough to recommend the chart type that it think is the best, and you can also select particular charts here. There's column, bar chart. There's wait, this is kind of compressed, and there's histogram. It's called statistics chart, but going in, you have histograms or box whiskers. You have pie chart over here. So this is how you insert different kinds of charts. We start, if you try to create a bar chart, say for example over here, what do I want to do? I want to use a bar chart to display the runtime of each movie. So I select all these runtime, and I'm already in insert. I'm going to charts. I'm going to click on recommended charts. See how it recommended. This is basically vertical bar chart, is horizontal bar chart, and maybe I'll just decide, okay, I want to go horizontal because it looks less similar than comparing to a histogram. Click OK. There it inserts the chart for you. But this is quite like not there yet. We can see the chart title is not there. This is something. This is something you can change however you want. You can type this as run time of movies. You can change this title however you want. More importantly, here on the axis, these are just from 1 to 14, just random vertical axis that doesn't stand for anything. We want this to reflect the movie names. How do we do that? So you can right click in the chart, go back into select the data. Here the category axis labels, click on this edit button. So this edit button right here, it allows you to select a range from your table. So respectively, we want to use these movie names as our labels. Click OK. Back, you can see how this already turned into the movie names. And going to the right, it has the runtime. It has the horizontal axis that presents the value. You can visually see which one's longer than the other. The Fellowship of the Ring is actually the longest. So you can see how this helps you visualize information. And it's very similar procedure on creating other charts. You basically select the data you want to use, you insert, and you adjust the formattings based on your needs. So let's say for pie chart. Pie chart is something that in statistical analysis, we don't use that as often now because they're just, on the one hand, is somehow more difficult to use in a lot of softwares. On the other hand, pie charts doesn't really, oftentimes it doesn't present a higher level statistical information. So it's not used as often, but in the meanwhile, it's one of the most intuitive charts as well. Here I have this section is from this data. It basically counts how many science fictions are there, how many horror movies are there. You can see here I actually use a count if function to do that. It's not a function that we will go into today. It's something we will cover in the coming up Excel workshop. But this is how basically counting how many movies of each genre are there. So from this information, I want to do a pie chart. I go to insert, pie chart. Let's say with the 2D pie chart, you can see here the pie chart is there, and it actually labels which color refers to which chunk of the pie chart. But still, this can be kind of difficult because it has so many of these colors, and even if I zoom in further, these two blues are awfully similar. So this is not the best way to view this chart. How do I add information, bring this information closer to the chart? So you can see in the design section in the ribbon coming up in the chart, there has this add chart elements. You can add, not legends, you can add data labels. So right now it's none. So that's why this pie here doesn't have anything on it. But if you go to these, if you just put your mouse onto these options, you can see the preview of this. So it can display the count, the number of count inside these pie. It can be inside on the edge. It can be right outside. Best fit is basically automatically chosen for you. And the most fancy one, the data call out, it displays both the category and the percentage on it. So if you click it, it will change your chart into this. And now, as you can see, is how it's much nicer. You can easily see, oh, this is science fiction, occupying 23% of the total count. And yeah, so this is the pie chart. And lastly, we have histogram that similarly, histogram basically checks distribution of a range of values, right? So let's see, what do I want to use for example? Maybe let's do runtime still. So select the runtime, insert, and you can see this, what is this thing that looks like a histogram right here. This is statistical chart. It includes the histogram in here. So this, but this looks pretty odd, right? Comparing to the real histograms coming from a large data set size. This is somehow crappy, like only 3 bins. Like it only cut it off the entire range into 3 bins. So how do I modify this? Say if this is too little, this staircase looking thing doesn't provide me anything. I want this to have more bins. How do I do that? So right click, and then you can see this format axis. You hit that. The computer is slow somehow. So here it pops up format axis. You can see how you can change the setting for the bins. So right now it's on automatic and it cut it into 3 bins. Say if I want to specify, okay, I want explicitly 8 bins. You put in 8, you hit enter. Now it cuts everything into 8 bins and it counts the frequency in all these 8 bins. It actually has one that counts nothing. But because it cuts the bins uniformly. And you can also say, I want to specify, okay, how wide is each bin? You can see how each bin is basically an interval. I want to specify how wide is each interval. I want to say, I want it to be 15. You can also do that. It would do that for you. So this is how you can change the bins option on a histogram. So hopefully you eventually observe the distribution of the data that you are plotting. Right, so there's the 3 basic chart types that just quickly showed you guys. There are much more options for these charts. You can see how you can change colors, you can change the layouts. It has a lot of like really nicely done visualizing functions you can do here. See how this immediately looks much fancier than the black and white charts back there. These are all the things you can do in Excel. We're not going to go into all the details, but these are all the things you can explore if you want to, say, prepare a presentation through Excel. This is something you can look into. So there goes the charts, right? That's for this tab. Is there any questions so far? You can feel free to speak up, or you can put it in the chat. All good? Cool. So that concludes our presentation section for today, and we are moving on to something that hopefully is more fun for you guys. The project that you can where you can experiment all these functions and techniques that we went over today. So here is a small project with a data set here. We can see this is a data set of size 100, and it has all these columns, first name, last name. You can see the columns are kind of compacted, so we're gonna expand them nicely. There's first name, last name, start date, salary, age, gender, degree, so education degree, year of experience, and IQ measurement. This is basically information from a company for their employees. You can see how there's salary for them. And on the right, you have these, I guess you can call them prompt. These are the questions for you to look into, things for you to do and for you to check, or values for you to compute. So starting from table formatting, you can see how they ask you to check for errors and inconsistencies. There's one very obvious right here. You can see this completely out of alignment. You should move this back in. And you can create a nicely formatted table. It's a more or less open question. What do we mean by nicely formatted? So see for salary, remember how Ethan introduce, you can turn them into accounting. So that's more appropriate for salaries, right? So those are the things you can do. And once you finish formatting, there are some calculations that they're asking you to do. You can calculate the average salary, max salary, minimum salary. You can feel free to move things around, or you can answer it over here. So you can do an average function over here if you select everything. You can put answers wherever you want. This is not something you need to like worry too much about turning in or like presenting your answers. It's more about for yourself to try all these methods and see whether you can get it working, see whether you know how it works. And hopefully this kind of practice gives you a better memory or better learning result. So you can, when you encounter a situation where these skills will come in handy, you can utilize them for yourself. So, right. So that's basically here. Hopefully all you guys all have this worksheet from the email that Ethan sent out in this morning. The last tab project is where this project is located, and you can go ahead and get a start on this project. Feel free to stick around. We will be here. Actually, how many? Let's stop screen share real quick. How many do we have right now? 8 people. So 6 beside me and Ethan. So let's do we need to break us into breakout rooms, Ethan? What do you think? Ethan, I'm not hearing you.
I don't think it's necessary. Probably just stay here.
Yeah, thanks for now. Let's just you can feel free to start doing the project right now. And I've already enabled you guys to share screen. So if there's any problem, any things you're confused with, anything you want to clarify, feel free to speak up. And yeah, we will all help you look into it.
Also, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good
Okay,
now.
perfect. I will say for some of those calculations, there are multiple ways to do them. So you can sort and do it that way, which makes it easier. But a more precise way and more exact will be to use formulas and to use calculations and functions to do so. Don't really worry about it if you can't. Some of the functions are going to be covered in the intermediate workshop. But if you have extra time, then might as well try. And again, if you have questions, just feel free to ask.
Yeah, there's always multiple ways to do things in Excel. Some are more efficient than the others. Some are just really just in different method preferences of each person. So don't stress too much about how you do a problem. As long as you get the right result, it works. Basically, it works.